Rick, good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Keith. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. You ready to get to it?
Yes, sir.
So, right before we started to do this podcast episode, we do what we always do, say hello, how you doing, how much we love each other. And then we really don't have a topic, right? We just start to like say, hey, what do you want to talk about? And we roll with it. Well, this morning it is be fully self-expressed. And what made me think about this was Rick's son Chris sent us a uh, a note, and it was a note directed toward me and him thanking us for the podcast that we do and the insights and that we share for him and his family, and it was just really really beautiful. And I was telling Rick that this is wonderful that we record these. We do it for ourselves, just to kind of like stay connected and just share a few things, and hopefully people will get something out of it. But it's really wonderful because Rick has a granddaughter, Andy, and she is just beautiful, lovely. I can't wait to see her and talk to her because I know she's just brilliant. And this is just such a gift for her to, and Chris and Brooke, to learn more about you, through you, about how you approach life, how you live your life, what's informed your life, what's informed your present moments right now. Because all they get now is like bits and pieces, it's dialogue that is back and forth and shared, but they don't really get to hear your insights. And I think about that with my mom, and that I ask her questions that really lets her open up and share. Like I ask her questions like, what informed you to adopt this value for your life? Like, was there an event? Was there's a person? Like, normally we don't talk to each other like that, but I really want to know. So these podcast recordings are that, and I'm thinking like your kids are getting to see a new dimension, another dimension. It's not new, but another dimension of you that they normally don't get to see. And I hope others are doing it. So I want to begin with the story, Rick, and then I'll have you share. So one of my dear friends at Mayo Clinic is an oncologist. His name is Don Norfelt. And Don is an amazing guy, really cares about the community, spent a lot of time over the last 15, 20 years in Arizona doing things to help the Native Americans. There is a coalition of Blacks against breast cancer for women. He spent a lot of time in the community supporting that effort. He goes above and beyond. Our dear friend Linda, who passed away a few years ago, he was her oncologist, and he brought them so much peace because of their cancer survivors, and they were always anxious about what the next phone call would be whenever Mayo Clinic called. And when they got his phone call, it automatically calmed them down. This was back in the days of caller IDs, no cell phones, but as soon as they saw Mayo Clinic, they would get nervous, and then his voice would be on the other end and automatically calm them down. I'm just giving you a little bit about this person. And then he had a patient, because he lived in California for a while. He had a patient who had AIDS, and the patient was taking the medication and getting better. And to honor this patient's commitment and fight, for 20 plus years, he would fly to Florida and run a marathon with this person.
Oh
Never
my
missed a
gosh.
year, never missed a year.
Wow.
But this is the measure of this person.
Yeah.
So anyway, with ToBeRe, I would have people come back and sponsor, right? So just like people that have gone through a workshop would come back and sponsor. And so he and I partnered on a cancer survivors workshop. And my role was to provide the fitness, nutrition, but also the mindset, also the kind of the consciousness about being connected to who you really are beyond, your physicality. And so he thought that it'd be good if his young sons could be a part of it. So two of his sons, he has three, but the middle son and the youngest son would come and sponsor. So one of the sons who came and sponsored, his name was Andrew. And Andrew was like any other kid. When you're not watching, he'd be mischievous and he'd get in trouble in school, but he's a great kid. So Andrew would come, and Andrew would listen the first day. And this is a 6-week workshop. The first day he came, you had Don getting up in front of everybody, of all these cancer survivors and the sponsors who were there, who'd gone through workshops before, who were supporting them, who had also been touched by cancer, of people in their lives, some of them who lost family members. And Don got there and said, hey, listen, I want to let you know that I owe you an apology because I failed you. Now, mind you, they're looking at this guy like a hero because of him walking that walk with him as a physician and guiding them to the other side of that cancer diagnosis. He's like, what I failed you for is because right now, after you finish your treatment, we hand you a pamphlet and we pretty much say, Godspeed and good luck. And I couldn't, I didn't know how to do more for you. And that's why I'm introducing you to Keith Jones, who's going to walk you the rest of the way on your journey, of gaining your confidence back, of living life fully expressed again. So at the end, this happened, throughout and the people there are crying, they're bawling, and they're like, oh my God, like you never seen somebody be this vulnerable, which is another avenue or expression of being fully self-expressed, is your true authentic self. So at the end of the workshop, we're having these kind of moments throughout the workshop, but at the end of it, everyone is expressing gratitude for the program and people that have contributed. So we're just about to wrap up and give hugs and go on our way after this 6-week workshop. And Andrew says, I got something I'd like to say, Keith. Can I talk? Everyone's like, Andrew? Yeah, sure. I mean, he's like 10 or 11. He goes up and talks. And he said, I just want to talk and say this to my dad. He's like, all I've seen before is a guy who gets up and goes to work every day. You come home late, you get a page, you have to leave. You're at our games. You get there just in time for the game to start, and then you have to leave right after to go back to the hospital. He said, when I mess up in school, you're the one who is lecturing me about what I should have done different and that I need to really make better choices. It wasn't until today that I really know who you are. Through this experience with these women that you have helped save their lives, I see who you are. And everything that you've done for me and our family and for these women, I couldn't be more proud of you. And I'm sorry for the way that I've taken you for granted and not honored the sacrifice you made. 11-year-old kid is saying this. Everybody's like bawling. Okay. He was like, and so the theme of this podcast is let people see all of you, the fully self-expressed you. And that's what you're doing with these podcasts, Rick, for your family, your kids. Like, this is going to be like your living legacy. Beyond all the material things that Chris and Brooke and Andy will inherit, it's your wisdom, it's your insights, it's the values and the thoughts that informed how you live your life, how you treated other people, how you connected with their humanity. And I'm just happy to be on this ride with you, man, because I get it all the time. I'm conscious of it and how much you blessed my life, man. And so thank you for being fully self-expressed. And I hope the listeners will work on themselves in such a way that they don't let life's challenges distract them. They won't let the media, what's going on in the world, or how people think they should be behaving, or who's in political office affect them in a way that they're not their true, authentic, kind, loving self. They won't let a challenge in their home life, in their personal life, distract them from still working on themselves to show up as their best self every single day, so that people get their fully self-expressed being. So I want to pause there, Rick, and have you talk about, the importance of being fully self-expressed and how it resonates with you.
You're making me nervous. It's a lot to think about and to say things about that. I'm not sure I can add to anything you said. You were so beautifully eloquent about the experience you had with Don and with Andrew. That's when you look at a 10 or 11-year-old kid who's used to being the receiver of nothing but advice, to see someone else who's a father figure or an authority figure be overwhelmed by things, I think that's a great leveler. And I guess Don wasn't really overwhelmed. He was more explaining what he thought was a coping situation for him. But the idea is that we're all people, and we all have roles to play within being a human being first. And sometimes it's a dad role, sometimes it's a, you know, an employee role, sometimes it's a professional role, but they're all roles that we play, and none of those roles are really the person that we are underneath, the human being behind all of it. The mind is not it, you know, the hands are not it. There's something indefinable that is a composite of all of these things that we don't even recognize. And when I was listening to you talk about Andrew and giving that tip of what was important to him, I thought of two things. One is how brutally honest children are, and how unaffected most of them are by trying to be a certain way. And that is extremely, extremely important. And I think it's a great argument for making children your role models. You know, did you ever see kids play? It's incredible. I mean, it's just being around young people is a wonderful thing. Don't you feel with your mom, for example, that the idea that you can actually talk about things other than the drapes, or when the bill is due, or the car broke down, you know, the superficial crap that we all spend too much time discussing, isn't it a great thing to be able to say to your mom, you know, what happened back then? I felt like, you know, maybe you weren't caring about me. Why did you do this or that? And have her respond to you in a way, as an adult and a human being, in a vulnerable way that makes life meaningful for you. Don't you feel that's important? I mean, I do. I don't want people to be judging me at all, but I don't want them to be looking at me as just a, you know, sort of a cardboard guy that goes through life. Anyway, the point of this is, I'll let you answer the question. It is important for you, right? It is. It's something that's required.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. You know, just everything about that moment is that with Don is by the way that other people saw him, because he was so open and vulnerable about how much he cared for them. But when he had to ask for a partner to help with their care, and just how open and vulnerable with them, and that didn't diminish how they saw him. That actually elevated his standing in their lives. And they weren't making him some kind of deity. They weren't doing that. It's the vulnerability, because he was so fully self-expressed that the vulnerability is what connected them with him even more. And that also must have touched Andrew, because he became very vulnerable at the end and talked about how that experience of that 6-week workshop helped him see his father the way that others saw him.
Yeah.
Which was just lovely and beautiful in a human being. And what I think happens is we get distracted by our minds' narratives about life, or we distracted by situations and we see them as like hardships and challenges, but really they're opportunities to work on ourselves, to go deeper, to be able to handle those things and cultivate inner peace so that we can be fully self-expressed. And when most people, I think, they're not fully self-expressed because they're the effect of something else that's going on in their lives. So for example, you go through a divorce, and that divorce, for most people, it changes them into somebody who's bitter, who's guarded, who doesn't trust anymore. You know, and that's one way to go about it, but that's not you. But if you can work on yourself to not take any of that on, any of that baggage on, and still be fully self-expressed, it's beautiful. You know, and you can be beautiful if you choose to. Regarding the question about my mom, you know, my mom and I, we were living that life, which was, we were talking about more about the challenges of life, or talking about the pleasantries, but not about the things that really matter, right? To me.
Right. Right.
And so regarding my childhood, and, you know, I grew up in a very abusive household. And so my mom, one day I asked her, you know, about it. And she shared with me, you know, she apologized for us being there. And I wasn't looking for an apology, because I saw her as a hero, like an incredible woman who was able to deal with that and still be solid for us. But she was able to share about that. She was able to share about the circumstances around my birth in a very open way. she was able to share about, love that came in, love won and love lost. She was able to share about, the things that, that she carried guilt about and had to learn to let those things go. And so by listening to her, she would impart these life lessons on me. And they were beautiful. And she was fully self-expressed because we have this relationship to where we are really, really open and vulnerable with each other. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, some parents do that, but it's more about a lecture and a life lesson. But to really let your kids see, like, hey, listen, here are my shortcomings, and this is what I'm working on. Like the way that I talk about, your father, who, and we're divorced now, is a reflection of like the areas that I still need to grow.
That's wow.
Like,
That's
what I'm saying? Like it's like I've been painting this person as a bad person that you can't count on, that you can't trust. But really what it is a reflection, not about what's unhealed, reflection that I still got work to do on me, because I can't see this human being. I can't see the being part of the human. And so I don't want you to go into relationships in which they don't work out and you hold on to the negative part of it. To long after the divorce, you're still talking about this person. You might as well stay married. I want you to be a person who understands that people come into your life and they go, and your responsibility or your path to remaining peaceful and loving is to let them go without any resentment, without any bitterness or anything like that. That's a reflection of you being okay inside. Or when you talk bad about them and you try to like, hey, I don't want to set you up for disappointment with your father, or you can't count on them, or what? That's a reflection of you. And so my mom never did that any step of the way with my stepfather, with my biological father. So I got to see the true measure of her. And it was beautiful, man. It was so beautiful. And so this is part of being fully self-expressed. And one of the reasons that I work on myself as much as I do, and I've said this in another podcast, is so other people don't have to work on me. So I do the work myself. And so what you see from me is consistently, I think what you see from me is like, man, this dude is always kind. This dude does not let anything take him off that path. This dude, he doesn't have this need, that somebody's got to be in his life for him to be okay. And he doesn't want to be needed, because that's not healthy for you to need me. We want to be with each other because we want to be with each other, fully loving, fully self-expressed. And the reason I show up that way, like, why is Keith always happy? Because he works on always being happy, being fully self-expressed. He should be angry about this. No, he shouldn't be angry about that because then he's not fully self-expressed. He's got this stuff on top of the fully expressed Keith. I got this other stuff on top of it. I don't want that on top of it. So I work on myself to keep removing stuff. Rick, I'm just constantly in this garden. I'm just pruning and thinning. That's all I'm doing. You taught me that.
Well, and it's the only garden you got, right? You're not in the business of making sure other people don't grow rutabagas if that's what they want in their garden. But sure as hell isn't going to affect you. I mean, you don't have to put the same things in there and let the weeds grow like they do. It's okay. I mean, you've got to let others go and also be respectful of your own need to be off that kind of path where you're always judging and criticizing others and criticizing ourselves. On this idea of self-actualization, I think the most important thing in terms of integrity for an individual is to be mindful that you're at the same time your own individual person, but in addition to that, you are part of this big whole, this big life force that's out there. And so the entire life force is sort of like a big potato patch, right? It's like tubers underneath the earth, and everything is connected. The way I conceptualize this, everything is connected, even though you may be a little tiny tuber of your own, but there'll be acres and acres of other tubers, but they all share the same kinds of identity. And the point of that is that life force is a kind of reaffirmation that you're in something bigger than yourself. And so if we fail to see that there is very little that we need to occupy our minds about, except things that would make our lives better and other lives better. If we fail to see that, we miss a good deal of life. And being authentic is recognizing the good and the bad and having a reaction to it that's consistent with your own path. And your own path is probably something that we all need to work on to make sure that we're not upset by those obstacles. Getting back to Andy for a moment and my family, I look at these podcasts as a way of going to church, in a sense. I kid about that, but I look forward to seeing you on Saturday mornings, because these are the kinds of topics that we normally don't talk about, particularly men. Women, I think, are much better, much more open and much better communicators than men to begin with. But this kind of thinking is not considered masculine, I don't think, unless you're in the context of like a philosophy course, or you've gone through some trauma and you're in a group and you're trying to work out some issues. But for people who are, for men who are not struggling and we're just talking as human beings to one another, that is something that's sorely, sorely missed. I would much rather go to a Starbucks and eavesdrop and listen to men, instead of talking about sports or money or their dates, talk about something that's troubling them, that is really important to them, like an addiction issue, or even not that. Maybe I can't communicate very well with my girl, or I don't understand why this keeps happening to me. Why do I keep lying about stuff when I don't need to lie? I just like it. I hide there. You know, those are the kinds of things we could help each other with, because we all suffer from that. And our communication paths in this country, I think probably everywhere, but my experience is the way that we communicate is awful. You know, I think the Buddhists have the right idea with communication, and they look at every word that comes out of your mouth with three IDs, the three identifying factors. Number one, do I need to say this? Mm-hmm. Do I need to say this? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said by me right now? Mm. Boy, if you could just surgically implant those filters in your head, life would be better, and I think you'd have more compassion for self and others. Anyway, I'm riffing way beyond the topic, but I really appreciate that Don and Andrew's story. That kind of really threw me. I mean, I can't imagine an 11-year-old kid realizing that his father has given his entire life to other people as a healer, recognizing that in the flash of a moment after this experience of seeing all of these people, and him hearing his dad say that despite all the help I've given, I still feel that I've done something that's inadequate. Yeah. Boy, that's something. I mean, as a father, I think I was more of a goofball than I was a role model, but I didn't want my boy to believe that I was infallible, but I didn't want him to believe that I was a jerk either. Yeah. You know, and so Don, when he did his things, he was living his life on purpose, and he was doing it in a way that was so different than me. I wish I had had that example where he was putting it out there and letting his son see that, which resulted in his son having his own opinion developed with his own eyes about who his dad really was, rather than his dad sort of creating a role model for him, or an artificial construct of who he wanted to be. Yeah, it's really a great lesson there, Keith.
Oh, thank you, Rick. You know, my friend John DeCuna, you know, he started doing the well-being practice with us and listened to our podcast. And he talks about, you know, he was so driven by his high standard for how he's going to show up. I mean, he and I joke about being a recovering perfectionist. And, you know, he's one of the top surgeons in the world, cardiac thoracic surgery. And he worked hard to get there, came from nothing, worked hard to get there, you know, had some great help and mentors along the way, but he was just, you know, obsessive about working on his craft. And, you know, and he talks about, you know, in his marriage and with his children, that because of that drive, there were losses along the way. And what he's done with the practice, and so he was fully self-expressed in his work life, right? although I think he'd admit that he was pretty tough in the operating room. And so now he's let that go and still hold the standard for excellence, but he's let the thing he's let the behavior that will serve as a barrier between him allowing other people to learn and grow and make mistakes along the way, not life-threatening mistakes for the patient, but growing a way to where they can still grow and learn, right? So he's really, really beginning to master that part of how he shows up with his energy in the operating room, sets a tone for everyone who is part of their care team. But with his children, who are all adults now, because of him letting go all of that type A personality that doesn't serve you, they're getting to see him differently. The practices help him reinvent how they see him. I was at a event that his daughter put on for Go Red for Women for the Heart Association. And she is a brilliant person, man. Just gifted and humble and caring and all those things. And the way that she sees her dad now, she sees him laughing about stuff that's not about medicine. She sees him being open and vulnerable in ways that she never did before. See him talking about situations before where it may have been someone else's fault. That kind of blame does not even show up. This guy is so extraordinary. It's unbelievable. Like, because this other part of him is now fully self-expressed. Mm-hmm. Vulnerability was one of the paths that allow him to show up, to begin to show up this way. And so, to your point, that these podcasts are also giving Chris a glimpse of you that he may have not have seen, right? Because he's able to fill in the blanks with his limited knowledge of who you are. And we talk about so many things that he's getting a fuller picture. And a lot of these experiences, human beings, they have similar experiences as they go through life and mature and age. And so he's able to apply these lessons and your wisdom in ways that are more than just adages or, this is how you should live your life. He's like, oh, my dad is sharing about how he didn't apply this to his life then, and it caused suffering for him and others. And now he's applying it now, and it's producing a different experience for him and others, a better experience. And so instead of going through that suffering, he can avoid it because you've shared it. And you've shared it from your experiences, so it can inform how he shows up in his relationships. And Chris is already like an outstanding human being. And so, I mean, just the gifts of this, man. But it's the vulnerability in which you share that allows him to see the true, authentic you.
Well, thank you, Keith. I think for Chris and for Brooke, I never thought really about the podcast having anything to do with them. Until we did so many. And then when Andy came along, I thought, well, this would be a perfect thing, for her to have after I'm dead, because then you can flick on the tube and there's your grandfather talking about something she may be working on, right? Some issue she may be working on, or some way of, maybe she just read something in a self-help book and, oh yeah, my grandfather talked about this. Let's check it out. See what Keith had to say. What does Mr. Singer, Dr. Singer say about this stuff? Anyway, the idea is that I could talk from the grave,
Yes.
And it's not so much that I feel wise. I don't feel that at all. I feel like I'm just an ordinary guy going through this stuff. And what we're doing, talking about it, is trying to say what works and what things haven't worked and how we've been, made fools of by life in so many ways. And so, I think that it's just a valuable thing for people to share about things that are important and the commonality of being human, which involves every mistake in the book. I mean, I've been a liar. I've betrayed people. I've hurt people. I've been totally self-absorbed. All that.
Same
all
here.
That. And I could do it tomorrow. I could do it in the next 10 minutes when this camera turns off if I don't pay attention. Yeah. So
that's it, Rick.
It's just, it's just something that we have to be mindful of always, our humanity. And I think that if someone starts talking about how enlightened they are, that's a definite tip off that they have no clue.
Exactly. Rick, thank you so much, man. The theme of this again was the importance of being fully self-expressed, and what you and I try to stay consistent with and are up to is to remove the barriers to showing up that way. And that requires you to work on yourself, not work on others, work on yourself.
So
Thank you.
that's it, man. I love you, Keith. Beautiful show, man. I really, really enjoyed listening to you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, likewise. Thank you.